Hello, fellow fight fans, and welcome to the Untitled Fightcast number 011. This past weekend marked the first of many upcoming events in the UFC that will be held in empty venues, and it was weird for sure. And speaking of weird, the main event between Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira ended in a very strange way that I didn't really understand until after I took a couple minutes to think about it. It was just strange. And 2 weeks ago, there was also the first MMA event held with an open scoring system and an epic title bout that I want to talk on. So wrap up, lock in, and let's get it started. It was really weird to not hear the crowd at the event this past weekend in Brazil. The music during the walkouts definitely helped a bit, but the voice of the commentators would echo around the arena whenever something exciting would happen. And I wouldn't say it was creepy, but it was just kind of weird. It was also super easy to hear the corners of both fighters as well. And this was actually very similar to the small arena or venue of the UFC Apex, where two future events were supposed to be moved to, that being Ngannou vs. Rosenstrike and Overeem vs. Harris. They were supposed to take place on March 28th and April 11th respectively, but the Nevada State Athletic Commission has banned all combat sports until March 25th and revoked all combat licenses until a meeting on the 25th, and I highly doubt that after that meeting they will do anything else other than extend that ban until the worst of the coronavirus outbreak is over. Literally this past week on the 14th, these events were to go on despite it all, but Dana White has been forced by federal and state governments to postpone these events. He did not do this out of kindness or to do the right thing, and it's honestly actually pretty upsetting. This week's event in London was even scheduled to go on as normal with fans and everything. Many of the fighters, due to travel restrictions, couldn't even make the event, so the UFC was desperately looking for damn near anyone to fill the card, even fighters that weren't signed to the UFC. That being said, the O2 Arena, where the event was supposed to take place, has been shut down due to the coronavirus, and so the card was going to be moved to the United States, where Leon Edwards said that he would not be able to make the event for his fight against Tyrone Woodley, and Colby Covington was possibly going to slide into that spot. The card was then going to be moved to an Indian reservation, but with Trump's banning of more than 10 people gathering in a room, this event too had to be postponed. And with fighters like Ashley Evans Smith, who actually had already flown over to London, unfortunately, there's no word whether or not the UFC will be compensating fighters for their travel or even their pay. And considering this is their job, what they use to pay the bills and feed their children, it's kind of sad to see that these events were being pushed forward for the sole sake of getting the UFC more money, because I'm not really sure what other reason it could be other than, the promotion and stuff obviously has cost money, and maybe the UFC doesn't want all of that promotion to be for nothing. But shout out to Scott Coker of Bellator for hearing about someone in the backstage crew of the Mohegan Sun going to the hospital with an unconfirmed case and shutting the event down literally just hours prior to the event going on. That was to go on this past Friday, just before the UFC Brazil event, and Scott actually paid all of the fighters their full purse. If you don't know how fight money works, you get paid half your purse for showing up and the other half for winning. And Scott paid his fighters in full, their show money and their win money. Not to mention, Bellator also paid the setup and takedown staff, the refs, judges, timekeepers, cut people, camera and cord people, sound crew, literally everyone, because they all showed up to do their jobs, and that's despite the Mohegan Sun actually wanting to still put on the show despite one of their guys being sick. So after all that, what about Habib and Tony? Well, considering this is the 5th fucking time they've booked this match, Dana has said that he would do do whatever it takes to make this event happen, even if it has to happen outside the US. And personally, after looking at a coronavirus map, Greenland seems to be unaffected, so I say ship their asses there. But that also being said, the UFC offices and the Apex Center have been closed until the end of the month. LFA has postponed all of their events through March and April. However, Cage Warriors 113 is still going on this Friday, March 20th, and has been relocated from the O2 Center in London that, like I said previously, has been shut down, and moved to Manchester. And just wow. Yes, there will be no fans in attendance, but this is just wholly irresponsible. And the venue that's allowing this to happen is absolutely partially to blame. The team to set up events like this are usually, I know for the UFC, can be like 200 people or more. So even if it's, let's say, 100 people for the smaller promotion, this is so incredibly irresponsible. I mean, unless they've somehow found a way to keep the staff to a small number, but even then, again, back to what I said before with all the people that Bellator had to pay, judges, refs, timekeepers, setup and takedown staff, the fighters, the teams of the fighters. I mean, how can you keep the staff down to a reasonable amount? This is an incredibly infectious disease where even if you don't have symptoms, you can be carrying it and spreading it. On to a much more lighter subject. Let's talk about Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira. This fight started out with Oliveira looking amazing on the feet. Confident, yet patient. Quick, yet measured. And oh so precise. I mean, flying kicks, spinning kicks, and he was switching it up between the head and great leg kicks. I mean, is this guy a submission artist or not? But that being said, when it did go to the ground, basically all Kevin Lee could do was defend submission attempts, especially leg locks and heel hooks, because let's be honest, sometimes the best defense really is a good offense. Kevin did get a couple good and hard shots off when he was in a decent top position, but they were few and far between. It was basically him not being able to get off any offense because he was defending his legs from Charles trying to do just anything mean to any one of his leg joints. Now that was round one. In round two, Oliveira looked a bit more tired, but not a whole lot. But you could see that all those submission attempts on the ground obviously took a lot of energy, but he was still very explosive with his strikes, and more importantly, he was still creative and confident. Oliveira had Kevin Lee hurt with a swift right uppercut into a right hook, and you could see it in Kevin's eyes. He was like, holy shit. He was still there for sure. He was by no means completely out of it, but I don't think he realized Oliveira's skills on the feet. Oliveira's range management with his push kicks, his teeps, and posting with his arm was also super duper effective. I mean, this guy looked like he's been kickboxing for, at least a decade. When Kevin got his own takedowns, Charles would go back to attacking submission attempts off his back, whether, again, it be leg locks and heel hooks. There was a couple of triangle attempts, and there was a really good armbar attempt in there at one point. But he also used great strikes from the bottom as well. Really good elbows, great hammer fists. Charles was just looking like such a well-rounded mixed martial artist. And he also has a chin because both on the feet and on the ground, he definitely started eating some more hard elbows and punches through the second round as Kevin was a bit more dominant in the top position when they were on the ground, and he was getting some good shots off on the feet. And going into the third round, Kevin legit looked pissed off. Determined, but also pissed off. Like, he truly thought after his knockout of Gregor Gillespie, who was undefeated before that he was the shit. The next guy to tear through the division. And hey, after a performance like that, I'm not knocking Kevin Lee for thinking that of himself, but the problem is that I think that he was legit looking past Oliveira, and no fighter should ever look past the opponent standing in front of them. So after a hard-fought 2 rounds, and especially with Oliveira being so good on the feet, I think Kevin was just a bit perplexed. So Charles comes out with yet another flying kick aimed at the face of Kevin, but Lee was able to sort of sidestep it. And then Kevin just started fucking swinging. Combos with the fists, into a head kick. Like I said, he was pissed, and Charles was eating these shots. But then the beginning of the end actually started with Charles throwing a front kick to the body. Kevin catches it and goes for a takedown despite having started piecing Charles up on the feet very well. Hard shots that, while some of them were a bit looping and winged and weren't the most technical, they were landing and fairly precise too. I think Kevin had a good read on his range and his timing at that point, and he was getting around Oliveira's guard pretty well. But he went for this takedown, whether it was out of frustration or whatever. He knows he's going against the guy that has the record for the most submissions in UFC history at 13, and he left his goddamn neck exposed on the single leg. Goes to the ground, and Oliveira is just squeezing the life out of Kevin Lee's neck, to the point that I think he got halfway choked out, because here comes the strangest moment of the night. Kevin taps hard 5 whole times, and then he tries to go back to fighting. He tries to go back to wrestling. The fight gets stopped, and he protested the stoppage and says that he never tapped. You could visually see him saying, "What?" And then he saw the screen. He watched himself tap. And I truly believe he was more or less mostly just out of it. Like, not all the way knocked out, but there was enough oxygen being cut off from the brain that there was this natural reaction to tap, but he didn't even realize he tapped. And that's how this strange night of Brazil ended, in a weird way, and Charles Oliveira breaking his own record and setting the new UFC record for submission victories at 14. And to finish up with Brazil, this week, instead of a Joe Rogan moment of the week, we're going to have a Michael Bisping moment of the week, because this was just gold. After one of his post-fight interviews, Michael Bisping, being an amazing post-fight interviewer and commentator, unfortunately, out of habit, ended up saying, "Make some noise," to an empty building.
Make some noise. Pull. Renato Moicano.
And to his credit, in good spirit, he did in fact make a joke about it later on in the broadcast. And even when you listen to that clip, you can hear him almost kind of chuckling to himself afterwards. And the beautiful pause of realization immediately after he said it, that he had slipped up. Michael, love you, baby boy. But now, let's rewind the clock a bit. A lot of people remember the John Jones, Dominic Reyes card, not just for a controversial end to the night in terms of the decision, but many controversial decisions. And I mean, calling it anything less than a fiasco by the hands of the judges, where, I mean, the MMA community, both fans and fighters, everyone was crying out for a solution, and along with putting in their 2 cents on what those solutions might be. But I think Luke Thomas said it best, and I'm paraphrasing here as I don't remember the exact quote, but he says something to the effect of, "Until we actually experiment and try things out, these are just ideas, and we won't know what works until a smaller organization can take the risk and tries it out." And wouldn't you know it, the ladies of MMA, Invicta FC, took the bold step forward and tried open scoring. And for the most part, it seemed like the athletes enjoyed it, but the way they did it was very interesting. The fighters weren't just told their scores. The judges' scores were shown to the coaches and the corner, and then it was their job to decide how, or even if, they wanted to tell their fighter what the scores were. And I think this is a great idea, because it allows the team behind the fighter to convey the info in a way that they know they'll be motivating their fighter, whether winning or losing. You're not just seeing numbers on a scorecard, numbers on a screen. You're having someone that you trust convey the information to you in a way that's going to get you moving in whatever direction you need to be moving in. And I personally love this, because in all the talk about open scoring before this, no one really talked about how the open scoring would work. And this is also great for us as spectators to actually know what's going on in the fight in terms of scoring. I think this is an amazing start for a long-standing problem in the MMA community. And this was nowhere more prevalent than in the final fight between Yulia Stoliarenko and Lisa Verzosa, who fought for the vacant Invicta bantamweight belt. And holy hell, was this a fight. So fast forwarding from the John Jones card to this one 2 weeks ago. This was the night before the war that was Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And that is number one best fight in women's mixed martial arts history for sure. But man, this is, if it's not second, it's third. There's no way it's less than third because I mean, geez. Look, I'm not going to go over the entire fight in detail because I really think you should go and watch this fight for yourselves, but I'll give a brief overview. So the first round starts off with fire. Both women going at it like it's a one-round fight. Lisa ends up taking a hard head kick in like the first 30 seconds. Yulia goes after her, runs right onto a big right hand. They're going at it for a little bit. Then Yulia, who has so many arm bars to her name, pulls guard and goes for one. Lisa gets out and it continues to be a back and forth battle, but Lisa definitely took more damage due to punches, elbows, and an even closer armbar attempt on the ground. So coming out of round one, 10-9 for Yulia, despite her bloody nose that she had, presumably from that very first right hand that she took. It was right on the button. Round two, much closer. Very, very back and forth, and ends up being a 10-9 for Lisa. So we're tied up going into the third. Already, we're seeing the beauty of open scoring. The fighters get to know it's tied, so they're going to work super hard. There's more intensity as a spectator, knowing it's tied going into the third. And as the third round goes on, Lisa really just starts to find her timing, create great angles, gets her range, and starts busting up the nose of Yulia. Her nose bleeding more now than ever, which is obviously not just looking bad in terms of the judges, but it's making it super hard for her to breathe out of her nose. And by super hard, I mean probably not at all. I mean, her mouth was open. She looked tired, but the way she was fighting, she wasn't tired. But breathing like that, you're going to start getting tired. And with just over a minute to go, there's a stepping elbow by Yulia that opens a huge cut above the nose of Lisa, right on her forehead. And I'm talking one of the craziest cuts I have ever seen. I mean, if you know the story of the Nate Diaz Jorge Masvidal fight and you see that cut and knowing that that fight was stopped by the doctor, I mean, that cut wasn't even close to as bad as this, what looks like an axe wound on Lisa's forehead. And Yulia sees this, and for the next minute, she just keeps coming in with stepping, jumping in elbows from both sides, and just continues to cut and smash up Lisa's face, leaving her with another cut as well under the left eye, and it's by no means a small cut either. Going into the fourth, Yulia is now ahead on 2 scorecards while Lisa is ahead on 1. More elbows from Yulia, and another cut opens above the left ear of Lisa, but Lisa is finding a home for her punches. Left and rights alike, but especially that right hand with both crosses and hooks. Now, going into the fifth, Yulia is just covered in blood, head to toe. The canvas looking like a murder just took place. Again, Yulia is still ahead on 2 scorecards. Lisa still ahead on 1. Lisa continues to find a home for that right hand. I mean, Yulia's face is just starting to really blow up from the swelling, and her hair is literally turned red from the blood of Lisa, and Yulia just lands more and more elbows, painting Lisa's face in a bloodbath. Ends up going to a split decision with Stoliarenko getting the crown as the first Lithuanian MMA champion, and what a fucking war these women went through. Seriously, for this to take place the night before, the Friday before, what is consensusly decided to be the best fight in women's MMA history between Weili Zhang and Joanna. I mean, this is right there. This was fucking crazy. And with all that being said, and with some of the kind of meh fights we get between the guys, I mean, women's mixed martial arts is looking damn good. So, while the coronavirus is running rampant across the world and disrupting sports as a whole, open scoring might be at least one solid step towards the cure for diseased judging. But for both things, only time will tell. Let me know your thoughts about either subject in the comments or on the Kevin Lee Charles Oliveira fight. But most importantly, wash your motherfucking hands and stop shaking the hands of other people, you filthy fucking animals. All joking kidding aside, I seriously love you guys. I hope you're staying safe. Thank you as always for the support. I will continue to do work from the safety and comfort of my home to bring you 3 videos a week, a vlog sharing my life, this podcast talking about combat sports, and gameplay videos on Friday. I hope you're continuing to live your lives the best you can as well during the midst of this crazy time that we're living through, and I'll talk to y'all in next week's video.